Oh, that's a good one. In the fall, I believe one of the best ways to catch bigger than average bass is with a spinnerbait. And so in today's video, I'm gonna talk about 5 big tips for spinnerbait fishing in the fall that I think will help you catch more and bigger fish. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. Right now for the month of October 2024, you can buy a USA made sun shirt and a bass hat for $67. All you have to do is add the sun shirt of your choice to cart, add the hat of your choice to cart, and you will see that automatic discount at checkout. Shopping at Fin Fishing is truly one of the best ways to help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel. I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so. Tip number 1 when it comes to fishing a spinnerbait, especially during the fall, is that it's very important to understand what water column the bass are in on any given day, because this can greatly change. A number of years ago, I was actually fishing on this exact same lake and I got on a good spinnerbait bite in the fall. Now, when I was fishing during that time, I was catching a lot of the fish in pretty shallow water. The water was really muddy. The fish were really in that top about 2 foot of the water column. And so today when I got to the lake, the first couple of pockets that I was fishing that exact same way. I was casting, I was going down the bank. I was really keeping that bait pretty high in the water column because I kind of had expected the bass to really be in a similar situation as they were just a couple of years ago. Now, what I ended up figuring out is that the fish were actually deeper down in the water column. And I think that the biggest reason that the fish were deeper in the water column today was actually because we have had a couple of really cold fronts, some of the first cold fronts of the year. And last night it was like 39 degrees. So really, I believe that the bass kind of just went a little bit deeper on some of the same pieces of cover that I was catching them on a couple of years ago, shallower. So instead of going down the bank and really kind of fishing that bait high in the water column and a lot faster, I had to slow down. I really had to slow roll that bait, kind of keep it down there in the bottom, and that is what really helped me to get a few bites today. Now, I think it's really also important to understand that this can change throughout the course of a day. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be here late into the afternoon, but I bet as this water kind of starts to warm up that these fish will move from that little bit deeper water and be a little bit shallower. So always pay attention to the water column that you are getting bites in and where the bass are positioned in it. Now, tip number 2 when it comes to fishing a spinnerbait, you got to put that thing in the cover, especially if you are fishing around very muddy water, which is something that I highly suggest. A lot of times in the fall, I will seek out muddy water. I will seek out those creek arms or those little areas that have kind of muddied up because of the recent rains, and I will actually go into them and fish a spinnerbait. Now, when you have muddy water, a lot of those fish are going to be positioned right next to cover. I remember when I was young and growing up, one of my friends didn't really have a lot of windows in their basement, and when you turn the lights off, it was completely pitch black. And when you turn the lights off, the first thing that you wanted to do was find the nearest wall or the nearest object so that you could kind of be familiarized with where you were in the basement. And a lot of times when bass are in muddy water, I think it's very similar. They want to be really close to cover to kind of make sure they know exactly where they are. So with that being said, it is so important to put that spinnerbait right in the cover. If you are even a foot or a 2 foot on the outside of that cover, you may not get bit at all. In muddy water, the bass's strike zone can be very small, and you might have to hit that fish basically on the head in order for him to bite. So don't be afraid about getting your bait hung up. It's just know that it's going to happen. From time to time, if you're putting your bait where it needs to be, you're also going to be getting hung up in the cover from time to time. It happens to the best of us, but just know that that means you are putting your bait in the right place. Now, something that I do really quickly want to mention about putting your bait especially in wooden laydowns, is make sure that you are bringing your spinnerbait kind of with the way that the tree arms are growing and not against the way that the tree arms are growing. Because if you do it against, you're gonna put that bait kind of right in the crotch, and that's gonna lead to you getting hung up a lot. So when you are fishing, when you're putting that bait in the cover, make sure that you are going with the arms of the tree. Now, tip number 3 is not all spinnerbaits are created equal. And I know that when I first got into spinnerbait fishing, I was always just picking up the cheapest spinnerbaits that I could find. The ones on the Walmart shelf that were like $1.99, and I always fished with those. Well, over the years, those ones always rusted out, the rubber always came off, there was always a lot of issues. And not only do you have quality issues with different spinnerbaits, but spinnerbaits also have a little bit different characteristics to them. There's a lot of good ones out there on the market. I love the War Eagle spinnerbait. I love the Booyah spinnerbait. One that I've really kind of grown fond of over about the last 2 years is the Berkley Power Blade. There's a couple of big reasons that I like this. The biggest reason is that this hook sits further back from the head than just about any other spinnerbait out there on the market. And so I never use a trailer hook with this spinnerbait, and it seems like a lot of fish that I do catch on the spinnerbait got that hook down deep. The other thing that I really like about this spinnerbait is the plastic keeper on it. It's kind of a unique plastic keeper, and it really helps to keep the plastic that you may put on the back of your spinnerbait up there. Now, me personally, especially when I'm fishing in muddy water, I almost always have some sort of plastic keeper on there. I like the Zoom Fouled Albert. I've also put Kitex on. There's a number of different plastics that you can put on the back, but I really like to not use super glue, because if you use super glue over a while, it just kind of like clumps up on your spinnerbait head, and then it really starts to not hold well. And with the keeper on this particular bait, I don't have to do that. The other thing that I like about this particular spinnerbait is the blades are actually a thinner diameter than a lot of spinnerbaits out there on the market. And the reason that that is important is because when you are slow rolling a bait, which is what I've been doing a lot today, these blades will actually spin a lot better, a lot quicker in the water column, and with that bait going slower if they are thinner. If you have those thicker blades, it's gonna kind of just weigh down when you are really making that blade go slow, or the spinnerbait goes slowly through the water. So I like those thin blades because they really keep spinning even when I'm working that spinnerbait really slow. Now, tip number 4 when it comes to fishing a spinnerbait, especially during the fall, is I actually like to mismatch the hatch. And I know, right, we've all heard about matching the hatch, but the only kind of difference, in my opinion, when it comes to the fall is that a lot of times there is bait everywhere. No matter where you go in the lake, you are seeing a ton of bait. So I really think that if you pick out spinner baits that look exactly like the bait that the bass are eating, which a lot of times is threadfin shad or gizzard shad, you actually just kind of blend your bait in. And look, I don't think that your bait needs to be vastly different. I don't think you need to throw something that looks kind of stupid, but I do think that sometimes mismatching the hatch a little bit will help you to get a lot more bites in the fall. So something that I've started to do, if I'm fishing around a lot of bass that I know are eating shad, like in this lake today, they're eating gizzard shad, little gizzard shad like this. And look, the main part of the spinnerbait where it's white, it looks like a gizzard shad, but the blades, I've chosen gold blades. And I found that over the years, I really like gold in the fall. And I think the biggest reason is that it mismatches the hatch a little bit. If I had chose silver blades, it's gonna look pretty similar to all those shad that are in the water. But those gold blades just give off a little bit different flash, and I think that it helps the bass to hone in on it. So anytime that I'm fishing, actually a number of lures, not just a spinnerbait, I mean baits like a square bill, for example, I like to mismatch the hatch a lot in the fall. I really think that that can help you get a few more bites. Now, tip number 5 is all about equipment. Sometimes I do videos and I forget to talk about the equipment, and it's always the number one thing that I get asked down below in the comments. So I really quickly just want to go over the equipment that I like when it comes to spinnerbait fishing. Now, the first thing, first and foremost, 20-pound straight fluorocarbon, which is pretty heavy fluorocarbon. But like I said in everything that we talked about, sometimes you're going to be catching some really big bass in really thick and deep cover, and you need to be able to get those fish out. Also, the higher your pound test is, it doesn't really impact the action of your spinnerbait. You know, baits like crankbaits, if you kind of up your fluorocarbon size, if you go from 12 pound to 20 pound, it starts to impact the way that that lure runs, the depth of it, and also kind of the wiggle of that bait. With a spinnerbait, it really doesn't impact the action at all. So I've actually even used 25 pound tests with spinnerbaits before, because I knew I was fishing around really heavy cover and really big bass. So don't skimp out on the line. The worst thing that you can do is hook a big fish and lose them deep in the cover. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is your rod. When I fish spinnerbaits, especially during the fall, I am doing a lot of target casting. I'm not usually casting this huge long distance like across the flat. I am pitching it up against a dock, and sometimes I'm literally pitching the bait, but other times I'm just making really tight casts to targets, stumps, laydowns, maybe around dock, maybe just around little different corners here and there. So I don't like a super long rod. This rod right here is a 7-foot 1-inch heavy power, and it's a fast action rod. I think that that particular size rod is really perfect. Something between about 6 foot 10 inches and 7 foot 1 inch. I think is perfect. It's small enough that you can really make those really precise casts, but you also do have length, which I think is important for when you do have to make a long cast, or for actually kind of horsing those fish out of the cover. So this particular rod is a Tharp Cobb series rod. It's actually made for a buzzbait. It's called the Buzz Burner rod, but with the fluorocarbon, I think it is a perfect setup for a spinnerbait. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is your reel, and specifically I want to talk a little bit about the gear ratio. Now, when in doubt, I always go with something in the 7 range, and I think that that's something that anyone can do. Something in the 7. This is actually a 7.1 to 1 gear ratio that I have on here, but if you get into situations where you are on a good spinnerbait bite where you have to slow roll that bait, I do suggest stepping your gear ratio down, because it just helps you to fish that bait a little bit slower. If you're fishing something that's a 7.1 to 1 or even an 8.1 to 1, you really have to turn that reel handle pretty slow in order to keep that bait down. So sometimes going down to something in the 6, maybe even something in the 5s, will really help you to keep that bait down. That's actually something that I learned from Skeet Reese. When Skeet Reese won the Bassmaster Classic on the Red River, he was fishing a spinnerbait, and he was using a 5.4 gear ratio reel. And the biggest reason, he wanted that spinnerbait to be slow. He knew that he tended to reel things really fast, and so it just helped him. Now, a spinnerbait is absolutely one of my favorite ways to catch big fish in the fall, but in this video right here, I talk about a few other patterns that you see during the fall that you can use other baits to also catch some big fish. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy this one as well. Don't forget to check out that fin fishing gear, and I will see you guys in the next one.